Okay, everybody, I think we're ready to start. If you have any comments or questions during the presentation, go ahead and send a message on the attendee chat, and I'll be sure and check on that. But I think we have the technical difficulties worked out this time, so it's taken a little bit of practice. It's a great system. Any meeting is a great program, but it's just a little bit. It's very detailed. So thank you for your patience in the past few webinars that we've had problems in. Hopefully this one will go smoothly. But again, feel free to send me the comments in the attendee chat. And absolutely send me any questions or comments that you may have, good or bad, of course, after the presentation, so that I can continue to improve on these. I try to choose topics on these that are kind of current themes and different things that I'm talking about to my clients, and appropriate for the training phase or the season that we're in. So that's kind of where I get these topics, and I think that all of them are helpful to all of you, but let me know if that's not the case, or if there's something that you would be really interested in seeing and learning about. If I'm not an expert in it, then I will pull in other experts to also present with me. So that's a lot of fun too. So let's get started. Thank you again for your time, probably taking some time out of your lunch break. Okay, so training with zones, this is obviously really important to me as a coach, because it's a way that I can kind of communicate with you all and also help you continue to reach your goals and improve and progress in your training. So first of all, types of zones that we use. Heart rate zones obviously is a very common one. Power zones, perceived exertion, and pace zones. So pace zones are probably the less common, and I'll talk about that as we get into the presentation a little bit. But the heart rate is really important. I use that a lot for zone 2, that conversational pace. And they're all used kind of interchangeably, just in case somebody doesn't really quite know yet what their zone 2 is. Sometimes it takes a while to get zones established. So we can use perceived exertion, and that's where I might say conversational pace, and hoping that the person understands that I could easily carry on a conversation while I'm running my zone 2 run on the Katy Trail. So that would be conversational pace. A moderately hard pace might be zone 3 and 4. A hard pace might be zone 5. So that's where you'll see sometimes I try to use that so that you can read your body a little bit better, listen to your body, and that can help you again on race day. So I have some clients that use perceived exertion only on race day. They either don't look at their Garmin, they usually wear their Garmin so that I have the data, but they don't look at it so that they can just kind of go by feel and successfully pace themselves that way. Other people need the numbers. So kind of depends on the type of athlete that you are and how accurate your zones are, or how we're able to update your zones. So let's continue. So why do we use zones in training? For me as a coach, it's really important because it's a way that I can prescribe workouts to you, let you know the intensity that I want you to be working in. For example, let's just say simply, if you're training for a marathon, and you have never run a marathon before, and you haven't really been doing any long runs, well then right away I know I'm going to have to give you a lot of base training. You maybe have base training, maybe you're primarily an endurance cyclist and you have base training from your bike, but it's a little bit different. We want to make sure that you have a strong, solid base in the run, and base training happens in zone 2. Some of you were included on the webinar that we did on metabolic efficiency, and so zone 2 is really important in metabolic efficiency, and it's all about teaching your body to burn fat. We have a huge amount of calories stored in our fat, so it's ideal if we can teach our body to reach for that, as opposed to easily our bodies just naturally reach for the sugar first. So, so zone 2 training is important for a lot of other reasons, just to build your body up safely and create a foundation for then speed work and muscular endurance work, depending on your goals and your races. So it's also safe training, again, injury prevention. So if you're the type of person that always goes out and trains in zone 3, which a lot of people that you see at the gym are on the treadmill just getting their run in, they're probably in zone 3, maybe even zone 4. And that's great. They may get faster, but they'll always reach a plateau. If they don't have that solid zone 2 base, they'll normally reach a plateau or they'll get injured. So again, these are just other reasons why I think the zone training is really important. And right now I'm kind of specifically talking about heart rate training because it is the most common, it's the easiest one for all of us to use right now, which we'll get into a little bit. Race strategy planning, we'll talk about that some more, but using zones to plan your race, whether you're using zones or pacing, etc. So, okay, heart rate training, let's talk some more specifics on that, how to get started. So usually when I start someone up in coaching, I want them to if they don't have some kind of a tool, a Garmin or Polar. Garmin is the best just because it has GPS, we can do so many cool things with it. Then I like to have you get a Garmin or a Polar. So the latest ones have the heart rate monitor in the wrist, the 735, the Garmin 735 and the 935 have the heart rate in the wrist. We've been having pretty much success with that. So it seems to be accurate and it's very convenient because you don't have that uncomfortable chest strap. But a lot of us are really used to the chest strap. So it's just a tool that we carry around and wear all the time. But the great thing about the Garmin and most of the Polars is that you can load the data into Training Peaks. So it's helpful for me too. So let's continue. So how do we obtain your zones? The easiest way for me to do it through Training Peaks is to give you a field test. So the field test I use for pace, I might reset your pace zones. I might reset your heart rate zones. I analyze the data and I kind of try to get as much information from you as I can as far as how you felt and how it went, how the test went. If you felt like it was a good test, if I look at the data and feel like it was a good test, then I may change your zones. If due to your training, I firmly believe that your zones should have improved and they didn't in the test, then I would probably say, let's keep your zones where they are, or we may bump them up a little bit if I know they've improved, and then we'll retest shortly after. That's the great thing about field testing is it's quick and easy. Not really quick, but and it's a pain, I know, but it's something that we can work into your schedule pretty easily if we have to update your zones. So other ways that you can do it is a VO2 test, which you see in the picture, the gal with the mask on, very uncomfortable. And again, just kind of like a functional threshold power test. It's not fun, but it's a great way to, for let's say those marathoners who we really, really need to work on their base and we really want to make sure we have the correct zone 2, their correct zone 2, and all the other zones too, we can calculate from this test. Then the VO2 test is great. I do have a couple of resources for that. I have Fleet Feet into Pair and also Race St. Louis, or we get Race will do that. And we also have a sponsorship with Race through the club. The blood lactate test, that's not very common. Jim at Power Up does a blood lactate test on the bike. And the results are similar to what you get in a VO2 test, but apparently more accurate. So, and again, what you'll find from that is you'll learn your zones and you'll learn if you are primarily a sugar burner or a fat burner. And so which zones, what you really need to work on based on that information and based on your goals. So that's about it on the testing. And just, again, let me know if you have questions. I have a lot of slides today, so I just want to make sure that I get through them in the time that we have allotted. So training with power is the next topic here. different types of power meters, and I just have a few of the most common right now that I have listed here. The SRAM and the Quarq, which you'll see in the picture, that one is in the crank, and that's got little tension gauges in it, so it measures your power that way. Garmin is in the pedals, which you see down at the bottom. It's a tension or pressure gauge in the pedals. And I have a couple clients that use those and really like them. Garmin's a great company to work with. And then Wahoo and Tacx are both trainers, kind of like you all are familiar with CompuTrainer at Swim Bike Run and at PowerUp. The Wahoo is the one that you can go and buy in the store. It just depends on the model that you get, but it's a smart trainer, and Tacx is a smart trainer. So those both will show you watts, and they you connect those with Tacx has its own program, kind of like CompuTrainer, but you can connect it with a different program such as Zwift or TrainerRoad. And same with Wahoo, you can use Zwift or TrainerRoad, and that will give you the graphics. It'll have like other riders on there and cool pictures, and just makes the training a little bit more interesting. And it will also show all of your data that you need. So those are great options if you want to do a lot of your training indoors where it's safe, and if you have to get it done at odd hours when you have kids and things like that. So a lot of my clients have those. Have a Wahoo is the main one. CompuTrainer is now out of business, so don't buy CompuTrainer. Why watts? So I really like training with power, especially if a client or an athlete really wants to improve on the bike. It's training with power is the easiest way to do it, I guess I should say. It's the easiest way for me to help you improve on the bike, because the data is just, power is kind of is what it is. It's hard to explain, but I will try. Heart rate is affected and influenced by so many different outside factors that, if your heart rate's low or high, you're not sure why, you're going to adjust your heart rate goals in a specific workout. Or we may analyze it and say, your heart rate was high, I wonder why. Power is power. So when you're training with power, and some of you come into PowerUp and you can see your different power numbers, your watt numbers that you're supposed to stay in for each workout, and that's what you do. And sometimes I'll just say, observe your heart rate. Oh, you don't really need heart rate data on this one. It's all about the power. So you'll watch power and RPMs, and that's all you really need on those workouts. And we can help you progress using power, using the functional threshold test, power test, which is coming up. The information on that is coming up in another slide. But again, if you don't have power, it's not the end of the world, but it's just more data for me to analyze. And I analyze the heart rate data and the power data separately, but also kind of make observations based on both of them together too. So the other thing is there are a lot of different metrics that I use in Training Peaks, and power can help make those metrics even more useful to analyze. So for a lot of reasons, I really like it. Why not? Power meters are very expensive. And I shouldn't say very. You can get them for a few $100s. And you'll see a follow-up email to this that Jennifer will be sending out about a great deal. But they are expensive. So we are buying so many things as we get into this sport and as we progress in the sport. So some people just aren't willing to put out the money that it costs to buy a power meter if they don't really need to. They might want to buy a new helmet or something cool for their bike, or new wheels instead of a heart rate monitor, and that's okay. But again, if you have really aggressive goals on the bike, or if you're an elite athlete that has very aggressive goals, then it might be something to consider, just because it can help me help you achieve those goals even faster. So heart rate and perceived exertion are enough for achieving goals, basically, except for what I just said. So it can just be helpful, and it's also great for training and seeing where you are in different workouts. So determining your power zones, and a lot of you are familiar with this, the FTP test. It's not fun. It's 20 minutes of torture, but it is what it measures is the watts that you could hold for a 1 hour race setting. So instead of doing that indoors, which would be just grueling and probably not accurate, we do a 20-minute test. And most of us as coaches, take 95% of your average watts during that test. And that's what we start with as your functional threshold power. So you can kind of think of functional threshold power as your lactate threshold, so the top of your zone 4. In power zones, it's not necessarily the top of your zone 4, but it's just a way of me explaining what that number is. And then we back into your zones based on calculations from Andy Coggan, who created this whole idea. Thanks, Andy. He created this whole idea. So you back into the zones, and they're similar, 1 through 5 or 6. It depends, but Andy's are pretty comparable to Joe Friel's heart rate zone. So that's why I like to use both of those. And then normalized power is another number that we use. Sometimes we base the FTP calculation off of the normalized power. It just smooths the data. So we'll put it that way. Another great thing about normalized power, when you're using a power meter on your bike, or you're comparing 2 rides, let's say in CompuTrainer, Power Up, or Swim Bike Run, you're comparing 2 rides. You can compare the normalized power. It's a way to compare one ride to another when they're not necessarily the same terrain, elevation. If you have stops, it smooths all of that so that you can say, okay, this is, a true indication of the power output from the rider. So long explanation of FTP, but important to know. And the other thing that I'd like to talk about with all of that is a lot of my clients they do not have a power meter or a smart trainer, and that's fine. But let's see, it looks like somebody might have a question here. So a lot of them don't have a power meter, but they do have heart rate, and they come to either Swim Bike Run, to the power classes there on CompuTrainer, or to Power Up, which is also CompuTrainer. So they can see their watt numbers. We can do functional threshold power tests, which are benchmarks. So even if you don't have a power meter when you're out riding on the road, your fitness is improving when you're doing those rides, and you might be coming to an interval ride at one or the other places. And then we can do a functional threshold power test about every 6 weeks. Sometimes it's every couple months. It just depends on the consistency of the person's training and their goals, etc. So that's one way you can kind of work power into your plan, into your training, without spending the money on a power meter. So, okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Oh, and you back here on the smart trainer and non-smart trainer, I was talking about that. Some of you, I still have a Cyclops trainer, which I love. It's just a basic trainer that you put your back wheel in, you add the resistance, and you just ride. You can change the intensity by changing your gears. So it's not a smart trainer, but it sure comes in handy if you need an indoor ride real quick. Or we'll take those down to the track. Sometimes that's a fun way to get a workout in. And then a smart trainer, that's one that will have the data and the power, and it will adjust the resistance on your back wheel or tire. So that's what that picture was showing. Okay, perceived exertion. I like this one. I like using perceived exertion a lot because in coaching and with myself, but in coaching, because it's really important to understand what's going on with your body, to be able to read looks like somebody had a question, but I can't see it on the chat here. So feel free to send me a text if you have a question. Okay, so perceived exertion, the best scale that I think is out there is the Borg scale, the Borg rating of perceived exertion, which is the one that's here in the picture. And again, so I'll use this. I'll use easy, which to me is zone 2. And 1 is really easy. That's recovery. That's not supposed to tax you in any way. It's only supposed to speed recovery. So that's really silly easy. It's hard to even run that easily. And then zone 2 is easy. That's the conversational pace. Race pace I use a lot. So I'll use that maybe even in your, if you do 6-800s on the track, I might say 400 build to race, next race pace, and then 400 hold race pace, whether it's whatever your next race is. Or I might say first 400 at 10K pace, second 400 at 5K pace. And you may not know off the top of your head what your 5K pace is, or currently what it is. So what you tell yourself is, well, could I hold this pace for 30 minutes? Let's say roughly 30 minutes. Could I hold this pace for 3 miles? No, this is way too fast. I better back it off. Things like that. And that's just a way that you can, again, kind of just read your body, listen to your body. I say that a lot, I know. And then the swim is perceived exertion is really a great tool for the swimming, because we don't use heart rate in the swim. It's more of an easy, moderate, hard, or I can use race pace effort in the swim too. So I think that's enough on perceived exertion on this slide. So why not use it if the person is not accurate in listening to their body? And I have that happen a lot. I'll say, do an easy run and for an hour and a half, and the person is in zone 3 for an hour and a half. And to me, that's really risky. If the purpose of the run is zone 2 aerobic base building, then zone 3 could be really risky. Now, if it's an advanced athlete that is training for their 5th half Ironman and they're trying to place in their age group, then yeah, I may have them spend a lot of time in zone 3 in their long run, but that's different. And that would be, they would also have a zone 2 run somewhere in their workouts too. You're never too advanced to have zone 2. It's really important to build and also maintain that base. So yeah, so they may not be accurate in reading their body, or they just feel like they want to get a good workout in, so they ignore their coach. Who would do that? And then training in the wrong zone and working towards a specific goal could lead to plateau in fitness or injury. The other part of it is if they're not training at a high enough level of effort, then they may not reach their goals. So that's a reason that I really encourage people to get the Garmin if they don't have one, because we just don't know for sure, depending on how well you can read your bod. Okay, so the benefits of, I think we talked about this a little bit, the benefits of learning how to listen to your body and feel your zones, and I love the pictures on this slide that Jennifer picked out for us. So less need to look at your watch or power meter. Your zone 2, I pretty much know what my zone 2 feels like, and I really don't have to look at my watch at all. I might have to look at it, if I start climbing a hill and should I back off? Yeah, it's climbing up there, and just take a peek. But also ease on race day. I do have some people, and I said elite athletes, but not even elite athletes, any athlete. If you can really be in tune with your zones and how hard you're working, then it's a great way to be able to race. So I've had people go from using their power zones in an Ironman to just going by perceived exertion, and it was a totally different experience, because they weren't as caught up in the numbers, and they just went by how they felt, and it was so much easier and successful. So and avoiding overtraining and injury, which we kind of talked about. And also the other part about listening to your body is, it's not really related to this slide. So the other part about listening to your body is knowing when you really need rest. I try to read that. If you're an athlete that comes around to group training a lot, and I see that you're crabby or really tired, or, just not enjoying it, or, not looking forward to the workout, then I may say, okay, you know what? It's time for a day off. I'm going to put a day off in for you tomorrow. So, because those are all signs that you're overtraining, and my goal for all of you is to avoid injuries for sure. Absolutely get you to the starting line injury free. So, that's my goal. Okay, so back to this training with zones. training with pace zones in running and swimming. Pace zones can be really fun, and it's a challenge sometimes to prescribe the pace zone workouts. It's just a lot of time for me as a coach. I do it with some of my advanced athletes that are at a higher level of coaching, and again, it's a way that I can prescribe workouts to very specific workouts. So, like, let's say on those 6-800s, I can give you specific paces to work at on those 800s, which is kind of nice. So it's also a way to test. So the pace zones are also determined by the benchmark testing too. So same type of thing, you have a pace threshold, and then I build zones off of your pace threshold. I shouldn't say I do, Training Peaks does. Training Peaks has the calculations built in, which is really nice. I would plop in your pace threshold that you achieved or that we did a field test on, and then it would calculate your zones from that. There's also, some of you see a workout that I'll use, Workout Builder. Workout Builder will help me also prescribe workouts, interval workouts, with either pace zones, heart rate zones, perceived exertion, with the Borg scale, etc. So sometimes you'll see that, and that's very specific. And a lot of people really like that. A lot of people really like perceived exertion. So I try to figure out what is best for each athlete, based on preferences, based on goals, and just make sure that we can reach your goals using the proper zones. So that's about on pace zones. Okay, same thing I already said about the benchmarks. Pace zone calculator, we have this little calculator down here, and there are a lot of great calculators on online that I'll use. So if somebody does a 5K test and we want to know roughly what their 10K could be, and we're just talking about standalone running tests. This wouldn't be off the bike. Off the bike would be something that we would try to estimate another way, but based on your experiences. But we could use this as a starting point too. So you back into your 10K or 13.1 time by using one of these calculators, and plopping in your 5K test. So that's kind of neat to see what would my 10K be, or what do I think my half marathon or full marathon could be based on that time. And it's just an estimate, but it's something that you can use to help you with goal setting. So that's fun. Pace. Swim T-pace tests. Sometimes a lot of the swim work that we do, let's say, for instance, at River Chase, is based on technique and increasing your speed using good technique. So we don't really use T-pace in the workouts at River Chase, but it's a way that I can prescribe workouts on in Training Peaks. And again, a lot of times I'll use perceived exertion. T-pace is kind of like lactate, not like say threshold, kind of like a FTP test. It's a test that I can put in as a workout, and it's a great benchmark. So it's a great way to say, okay, let's measure your straight 1000, see what your time is, and let's really work on it here in this off season, and let's, drop your 100 pace by 5 seconds, or 10 seconds, or what can we do? How much can we drop it so that when you come out of the gate in the spring, your swim is much improved? And that's a great way to do it. Again, just benchmarking and remeasuring those benchmarks, retesting them and measuring to see if there's improvement. It's also great for motivation. It can kind of give you more of a purpose for each workout. If you have that test dangling out there, then it might make you push yourself a little bit more and understand the reason for the workouts. So I do have also, while I'm here with you, I have a new testing protocol. I'm trying to figure out what to call it, but a new series of benchmark tests that I'm going to use on some people in this upcoming off season. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and we'll have a webinar soon on off season also, so that we can talk about different things that you can be doing when you're not racing every weekend. So I'll be sending more information on the new, it's called V-Pace, but it's a new one. So the T-Pace is a straight 1,000 test. Sometimes if you're not up to that distance, then I'll give you a shorter duration, a shorter distance to do, and calculate your time per 100 until we build you up to that 1,000. But the 1,000 is how we get the T-Pace per 100. And then to give you different pacing, sometimes it might be like 500s minus 5 seconds per T-Pace minus 5 seconds, something like that. So that's a way that I can prescribe the workouts. But yeah, so that's the best way to do it with swimming. Is just you can use heart rate straps in swimming if you're curious to know what your heart rate is, but it's effective using perceived exertion and the testing as well. So putting it all together on this slide, it shows kind of a comparison side by side. So using all the different zones, wattage zones, heart rate zones, and rate of perceived exertion. So if you want to kind of see what the relation is between all of them, you can see. And I think it's important to understand kind of the purpose for each of the zones. So in that second column where it has active recovery, zone 1, really important. If I say optional recovery run, that means zone 1. That doesn't mean zone 3. If it's zone 3, then you're just digging yourself into a deeper hole. And the next day is not a day off. The next day is an important workout. So think of it that way. It's strictly for recovery. And I say, optional sometimes because that's where you need to listen to your body or ask me what I think, based on how you're feeling. But the recovery runs or bikes or swims are just meant to speed recovery, kind of get your circulation going. They're not a workout. Endurance is zone 2. Endurance, that's the conversational pace, that's the easy pace. Tempo, a little bit faster. Tempo, again, is that pace where that effort where you feel like you're getting a workout, your breathing's getting a little bit harder. 3 to 4 sweet spots. Sometimes you'll see sweet spot. A common workout is, let's say, 2 times 10 minutes on the bike at in zone 3 and 4. Sometimes it's a percentage of FTP. So sweet spot is working more muscular endurance and speed for longer races. Lactate threshold, that's that one number. So that's the top of your heart rate zone 4. That's middle of or in your heart rate, in your power zone 4. And rate of perceived exertion is a 4 to 5. So I don't need to read to you all, but you can kind of see the rest and maybe use this as reference. I like this slide a lot. It just kind of sums it all up. So the next webinar we'll do next month, September 21st. It's same time and day on a Thursday. And we're trying to keep that as consistent as possible. This time seems to work for a lot of people. So again, thank you for giving up your lunchtime for this. And the next topic is building your annual training plan. And right now I have a lot of people starting to look at 2018, which if you haven't already, send me a wish list of your races, or we can talk about it in your next meeting. But we're starting to work on that and understanding that it's really important to build the plan based on your accomplishments this year, based on your goals and different objectives that we'll work on to improve, whether it's the swim you need to work on, the bike or the run, or strength training. We'll work on that. Hold on, sorry. My phone is ringing. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, so I think that will be a great one, and it's putting your races together in a way that you have A, B, and C races. So, and this has been kind of a common theme. It's when you have a mixed season of sprint races, Olympic races, and ultimately your A race is that half Ironman or Ironman. and that's your A race. And that's where I need to make sure that I'm building you up for that race. At the same time, we're sprinkling in other races. But then frustration comes in when you're super strong in your training, everything's going well, but you go to do a sprint and, well, you didn't place as well as you thought you could. But the problem comes in where if you're training for an Ironman, you have to do a lot of zone 2 training. You're training at slower paces. So it's hard to switch gears and get your body to train at a sprint pace. Now, if we sprinkle in some A sprint races because you really want to see how you'll do in a sprint, then we have to be smart about timing your Ironman or half Ironman race to make sure that you won't get injured in your training for that, if that makes sense. So sometimes it's fun to take a whole season and say, I'm not going to do a long distance race. Not that you ever have to do one, but a lot of people seem to gravitate towards that. So sometimes it's good to just take a season and say, I want to see how I do at local races, and maybe travel to a couple of short super sprints or sprints and see what you can do in those distances. Or other side of it, as people say, I'm training for an Ironman next year and that's my focus. I don't want to race at all. I just want to train. And that's great too. So, and we have a lot of people that like to race to train. It's fun being out at the races, and it's fun. It's absolutely a good workout. It can be speed workout for your next race. So with that, you will all get a recording of this presentation, and we will I'll answer any questions after the presentation. Feel free to send me an email. Let me know of any questions that you have or any ideas about future presentations. But again, I read you all, so I get a pretty good idea of what I'd like to talk about to the whole group. So thank you again, and I will see a lot of you at the swim tomorrow morning. I look forward to it. Bye-bye.